Uberto, congratulations on the film. A really very different, very grounded approach to the story of Odysseus, I thought. And of course, we know that Christopher Nolan is already filming his version of the Odyssey. We've all seen the shots of Matt
Mhm.
Damon in that amazing helmet. But I was thinking with your film this year and his film coming next year, do you think perhaps we're at the start of a bit of a resurrection of popular interest in Greek history?
Well, I think it goes this resurrection of interest, in particular in the Greek myths, has been going on for a while. Um, in Certainly in the literature world, the world of writings, um, you know, Haggard afterwards Penelope is maybe one of the most striking examples, but there have been a great deal of novelizations of aspects or moments of Homer's stories, whether it's Achilles or whether it's um, and Patroclus, or whether it's the role of women in the epics, the role of women in the Iliad in particular. Uh, so it comes in waves. I mean, for me, Homer has been a constant throughout my life, but as an Italian, as a Mediterranean, it is natural. Our myths are the Greek myths. We don't have Roman myths, or if we do, they are late. Um, so I grew up with them, and I find the reconnecting with myths now fascinating, in particular the Greek ones to us. And I think it's maybe has to do with looking for certainty, for some form of solidity in a world which is certainly all but solid.
Now, you're obviously very interested in Greek history, Greek literature. Um, you obviously read the stories when you were growing up as well. So does this mean that this film has been sort of percolating away in your mind for quite some time?
For a very long time. I mean, yes, my parents read me the myths, the Greek myth, when I was very small. In Italy, you obviously have to study Homer at school, and then you grow up further. And so when you are maybe a teenager, you're connecting with Telemachus and his difficulties of growing up and his relationship with his mother and with his absent father, the difficulty of relating to an absent father and wanting to make your own life and your own way in the world and not being allowed to do that. And then you become a father, or I have become a father, a husband, and then what makes more interesting what does with the family and the family dynamic and the responsibility you family member, whether you are a son, a wife, a father. That's really what we focused on more than anything else is the story of a family wrenched apart by war and trying to reconnect in some way after the tragedy of war. And of course, what war does to people, what the people who go to war, but also the people who wait and stay at home.
Yeah. What was it about Odysseus's return home that particularly fascinated you? Because there's a really strong contemporary feel to it in terms of his PTSD and his survivor's guilt.
Well, I'm happy you feel that it feels contemporary, but to me it feels timeless. In the eighth book of the Odyssey, of Homer's Odyssey, when Odysseus listens to the singer at the court of the Phaeacians singing about the war at Troy and the heroes at Troy, he cries. He cries. He cries. His memory is one of pain. It's not a memory of glory. And that's where we really started when we started working on the script. That was the focus for the central character. How war had affected him, changed him, weakened him, and what it meant to carry the guilt of war, not just for what he has done and seen in war, but also for what it meant being at war in terms of his relationship with his family. Why did he go to war? Did he have to go to war? And why didn't he come back sooner? So it's about choices. It's about every day of our lives, we can go left or right. We can go home or stay out a bit longer. We can be a good father, or we can be an absentee father. We can be a faithful husband, or we can indulge in being distracted by other women. And this is really what, to me, is interesting. But of course, and it might be contemporary, but it also timeless. And when it comes to the soldier and PTSD, which you very rightly pointed out, yes, indeed, when we were working on the script, when I started working in detail on the script in the last 3 years, when I became the director of a film that I was only aiming to produce, I did a lot of reading of interviews with veterans of the Vietnam War. And in fact, there are lines in the script that come from the mouths of veterans from the Vietnam War. Not only, but the end of the film, the words that Penelope speaks are very much inspired by the words spoken by a wife of a returned veteran from the Vietnam War. I believe, I seem to remember, she was from Ohio. So it is timeless, or it is of today because it is timeless. We didn't have to modernize anything. Homer is modern, speaks to us directly. It's very complex, and of course it allows us different readings for different moments of the epic and different readings for different moments of the characters, which is why Christopher Nolan will be able to make a film which is completely different from ours, and it may be potentially also be faithful to Homer. Although I do not like that splendid helmet. I think it's the wrong period at the wrong time. But anyway,
have you told him that?
No, I wouldn't dare. I would not dare. No, I think it looks like his iconography is very much the iconography of classical Greece, whereas we aim for an iconography which would be unnoticeable. And so a language, whether it was in the clothing or in the architecture, that was timeless, that wasn't linked to any specific period. We didn't want to invent anything, and we certainly wanted to stay away from the classic iconography, which belonged to 800-900 years after the time that Homer writes about.
Yeah, because you've got no mythical beasts, you've got no splendid gods or anything like that at all. You've stripped
certainly. Yes, the first thing we decided to do was to have a journey, an odyssey of the soul, not an odyssey, a geographical odyssey. And so everything that we have in our story takes place on Ithaca. We never leave Ithaca. But more than anything else, you pointed out there are no gods. And there are no gods because we wanted to make sure that the responsibility for the actions of all our people, in particular Odysseus, but not only Odysseus, lies with the human, not the gods that manipulate, guide, help, distract the mythological figures. So it is Odysseus' responsibility for having won the war, for having left Troy a ruin, for having not returned for years, for failing to be a good father, for failing to be a good husband, for not finding the strength to be the man he should be. And he feels he should be, but he's unable for much of even Homer's own work, to be the wrong leader of man. He's a man who took the best people of his country, of his kingdom, to war, and he comes back alone. That is an enormous responsibility. It's a responsibility that soldiers, Vietnam veterans, for example, were speaking very, very clearly about the guilt of not bringing back the soldiers they were leading in war. That is, we are responsible. We cannot say it's happening because of higher power. And whether they are in heaven, these higher powers, or on earth. we were only obeying orders is not something we can accept in today's world.
I think also the guilt goes the response that Odysseus and indeed soldiers from the Vietnam War would have got. The response from people when they come back is not necessarily the warm welcome that perhaps you might think it might be. It could be completely something different.
That is very right. Obviously, that is very much what happened to the soldiers coming back from Vietnam, that had become a very unpopular war in America at that time. But we are also talking about returns from other wars. And the interesting thing to me is that on the whole, it is the people who send soldiers to war who talk about them as heroes and who welcome them back as heroes, but not the soldiers themselves. They do not consider themselves heroes. They don't think that what they have done is heroic. Usually they try to forget the war. They try to forget what they have done. And this is, of course, what Odysseus is trying to do. He's trying to forget the experience of war. And will he be able to forget it, or will he have to remember in order to forget, which is what Penelope tells him at the end of the film.
And certainly when he comes back, I don't think he's really allowed to forget it to start with, because he has such a reputation.
Absolutely. I think it may be my favorite scene of the film, or one of my favorite scenes of the film, when he talks, he's forced to talk about his experiences in war with pigmen, with the people who look after the pig. And there is a voice there that talks about heroism, and he rejects that notion. He rejects the idea that what they have done in Troy was heroic. He cries about the destruction of a city. And I think that's what really people carry, and that's what we should all carry, and we should all think about when we are confronted by the reality of war. Whether war is just or unjust, and of course that depends on the point of view. I think there are wars that need to be fought, but they are still horrendous, and they still poison the people who fight them and the societies who lead them.
You mentioned the character of Telemachus earlier on, and I guess sometimes with this story, it's quite easy to think of it as being almost a two-hander between Odysseus and Penelope, but actually Telemachus is so crucial in a lot of ways. He's so torn in many directions. He's never met his father. He's angry with his mother. You must have had so many young actors wanting this role. Why did you go for Charlie Plummer, or was he always your first choice?
I thought about many actors, and I had seen Charlie's work in a wonderful film called Lean on Pete, which was young Charlie and his relationship with a horse for much of it. And what was wonderful about that role was how much we understood and we were close to his soul, even when he didn't have to articulate his feelings. And of course, in our Odyssey, but not only in our Odyssey, in Homer's Odyssey, and in particular in the first 4 books of the Odyssey, Telemachus is capable of articulating a great deal, but also there are moments when he's not, and when his feelings have to be repressed. And I wanted an actor who was able to communicate what he felt inside without necessarily the use of dialogue, the use of words. And I think Lean on Pete drove me into Charlie's arms, or rather, got me to ask him to be in the film. And he was so wonderfully patient and generous with me, and was so taken by working with people like Juliette, with talents, inspiring talents of Rafe and Juliette, that I think he made a great addition to a very difficult role, because it's not a sympathetic role. It's a role of a frustrated young man, and to convey frustration without pushing the audience away is very complicated. I think his soul came out fully as a man, as Charlie himself came out fully in the role, and I'm really happy with him.
Yeah, it's a terrific performance, and I mean it goes without saying that Rafe and Juliette are wonderful as well. Roberto, it's been lovely to talk to you again.
Thank you very, very much, Freda. Yes, of course. Thank you, Freda. Thank you for your continuous support.